Welcome back to our Line Opinion panel one final time this week. Virgin Galactic is announcing a delay in its plans for commercial space flights. The company says supply chain and labor issues make 2023 a more feasible goal. And this project obviously has major implications in southern New Mexico, Jessica, although maybe not all the way down into your area in Carlsbad. But how much of a blow is this for that part of the state as one of the big economic drivers?
Right. So we look at it as a revenue generating operation. And so when you talk about it from that standpoint, we are talking about a blow. We invested in this idea of space tourism for not only this vision of the future, but also for the boost it would give to our economy. So when you see it struggling, you just know that there are going to be implications for us at a revenue level.
Is part of this, Tom, that Virgin seems to still be, in terms of that economic driver, the only thing that people talk about? They reported $93 million in losses in the last quarter. But I think that there's a lot else going on there that may be helping with that economic situation that we're not hearing about. Do you agree with that?
Most definitely. And by means of disclosure, my firm does a lot of work in the economic development arena, which includes parts of the spaceport in a peripheral. But when you look at the spaceport as a whole, it's much more than Virgin Galactic. Obviously, Virgin Galactic is the premier tenant as far as getting the most attention. But there are other missions out there. Spin Launch is a fascinating hypersonic centrifuge that shoots satellites into low orbit. There are a couple of other very interesting missions out there as well. But I think really looking at it from a New Mexico perspective, it's how does the spaceport fit into the larger microcosm of the community of aerospace. And when you look at all of the aerospace influence in Albuquerque at Sandia National Labs, the influence that Los Alamos has as well, and a number of the private entities, it's really probably the most visible part. And we just want to be able to see those vertical launches like Cape Canaveral, but that's just not how the spaceport is set up. It's set up to be much more of a mission-driven operation as opposed to the giant spectacles. But they're doing well in spaceport and a lot of different missions taking place out there.
And it was about a year ago that we had that first launch where Richard Branson himself went up, and really not much since, and in part because of revelations after the fact that there were some problems on that flight, and they had to work with government officials to sort of get things in order. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin, they've already conducted 4 successful passenger flights to space since last summer. So what are we to make of all this in terms of Virgin's viability, Kathy?
So I'm just going to say that, I hate sounding like, why are we doing that, or get off my lawn kind of thing. But I didn't know anything about the hypersonic centrifuge, Tom, and I'm glad for the education around it. But it just seems a bit like waiting for Godot at the spaceport. Like, is this really ever going to happen? And learning more about the losses, and obviously Virgin Galactic is out there as the premier tenant. So maybe we need to know more about what these other tenants are going to do and how we're going to get a return on the $220 million investment that we made as a state. But I think for a lot of lay people who are not working in that economic development space, they're looking at this like space tourism, $450,000, $500,000 for someone who's very wealthy to go up into space. Doesn't mean a whole bunch to most people.
Yeah, it's a high price tag. We've talked about that a lot. And again, worth reminding folks, right, Jessica, that this was a project funded by taxpayer dollars. And so there is an expectation of some success here to repay that investment, right?
Yeah, so I think Kathy kind of hit the nail on the head there. For those who are not insiders or who aren't paying attention and who are just reading the headlines, they are looking at the setback or the delay in the commercial operations until 2023 as, you know, as a shrug. For those of us who kind of have some insight into what's happening, it seems to indicate problems or trouble, especially when, as you said, Kevin, you look at what Blue Origin is doing. But I think Tom was very insightful when he pointed out there is more happening there than we tend to know about. Maybe the bigger question is, how do we do a better job of talking about this new industry with your everyday average New Mexican and educating them about the future benefits, question mark there, but hopefully to this whole project.
Yeah. And again, despite the delays and that competition from Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic maintains that its Delta class rockets will be the best and most sustainably designed tourism spacecraft. Do you think that's enough of a talking point to help make up the difference? I'm not exactly sure what a sustainable space vehicle is, or what that means, but what do you think, Kathy?
Oh, I don't know. Elmer J. Fudd just keeps coming into my head. I own a mansion and a yacht. I don't know. I think that most people don't know, and so I'm hoping that we just get more education about what is happening, and if it's going to be the best, I need to see it. Because right now it feels a little bit about theater, a light theater of the absurd.
Yeah. Tom, what about you? Can you pick up on that?
Not necessarily on the theater of the absurd, because there are a lot of different activities that are taking place out there. They're caught in a catch-22 because there are a number of different missions that are taking place out there. It's like talking about what Sandia National Labs does or Los Alamos. There's a lot of different missions that are out there that they just behind the gates, they just can't talk about. But I agree, both Catherine and Jessica bring great points that it needs to go just beyond, well, trust us, there's stuff going on out there. And so they really have to find a place, I think, all these entities that have these, secure operations is find that middle ground where you can provide just enough interest or information to let people know that this just isn't a waste of taxpayer dollars. To get that information out without giving away all of the reasons why they might be doing missions there.
And that's a great reminder too, Jessica. I'll turn to you real quick on this as we close out. But the transparency issue has been something around Spaceport as well, because these lease agreements and things are not public for the most part, and there are proprietary secrets in there, and that's the argument that's made. But do you think there needs to be a stronger push to actually be able to see the dollars and cents that are coming in and going out at the spaceport?
I'm always going to say yes to transparency, no matter what it is. So yes, the answer to that question is yes. I think especially because people tend to associate the taxpayer investment that we made into this as the backbone of this industry in New Mexico, we want to see what is happening. They want to know that there will be some sort of growth, that return on investment that Kathy mentioned earlier. When it comes to transparency, we all realize that there are industry secrets that will need to be kept. But that does not mean that there aren't certain items that shouldn't be shared or brought to light. I think that it's fair to ask to see the tenant leases, to have at least a general understanding of the investment that is being put into this Spaceport America.
All right, thanks. That's all the time we got. Appreciate the line panelists as always, and be sure to let us know what you think about any of the topics we covered this week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.